Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare Jai Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Jai Radha Madhava Shri Shri Radha Madhava ki Jai. So, we will make just a few short announcements what happens for the rest of the day. We have special guests today, isn't it? Students? Yeah? Welcome. So, who you just heard since the last 45 minutes is Gaura Krishna Prabhu. He is not unknown here, even he was for how long? How long you were gone? Now?
I've been in India 5 years.
5 years. But he was very substantial part of the creation of this place. For those who doesn't know, you are sitting in an old garage, which was here before. I didn't saw any documentation or photos, but it must have looked very, very special here. Something similar to the neighboring buildings when you go around. So this actually, with his great help, this was turned into this temple room. It's not easy to do such a thing, especially because we are working in a fashion that we are working with volunteers. Nobody gets paid. And here with people come and go as they want, anytime. So it's not easy to actually do a project like this. So anybody who actually contributed a little bit part to the fact that we are sitting here today, it's definitely a special personality. Whatever difficulties he went through, so we can only say Gaura Krishna Prabhu ki Jai. So this is the first welcome. And then for those who are not regular, who don't know, we have a general program here. After this chanting, there will be a lecture by Lalitanatha Prabhu today, and we read from Bhagavad Gita as it is. That will go approximately for 45 minutes of the new time, the summertime. And after that will be again little chanting together, and then a big feast together. That's all part of Krishna consciousness, of this movement. We do it every Sunday. Whoever wants to come again and see it again, he is welcome again. So, so this is a regular function here. Then we will say a little bit more after the lecture. I don't want to make it too long. There will be a few more announcements, So this will go on until 4:30. Okay. So please, now comes the lecture, and after that we will hear a little bit more what will happen. Thank you very much for coming.
Hej Krishna. Jeg skal lige høre, om det er i orden med alle, vi taler engelsk. Er der nogen, der har et problem med det? Okay, fordi vi har nogen, der ikke forstår dansk. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So, as Lalitanatha Prabhu said, we're going to read here from Bhagavad Gita as it is, which is Srila Prabhupada's translation of the Bhagavad Gita along with his purport or commentaries. Bhagavad Gita, of course, is a very, very classic and central book in the Vedic literature. Probably it's the most widely read text from the Vedas, from the Vedic scriptures. It's a long conversation between Krishna and Arjuna before a war is gonna take place between two sides within the same family. And Arjuna is the general of one of these armies, facing on the other side his cousins and his grandfather and his teachers and friends and well-wishers with whom he has to fight. So the Bhagavad Gita starts out with Arjuna, in one sense, waking up to the situation that this is, first of all, a massive war that is going to take place, and it's not, and his enemies are not ordinary enemies; they're actually his own family he's going to fight against. So he then starts having a conversation with his chariot driver, Krishna, about, actually, I don't feel like fighting. I really don't. If I start looking at it, my limbs are quivering, my mouth is drying out. I feel that I only see inauspicious signs everywhere. I don't see anything good come out of this battle. Whether we win, whether we have victory or we lose, I don't see any good coming out of this battle at all. And then he goes on to say that Krishna, I will not fight. I shall not fight. But then he also says, but Krishna, I'm confused. Please instruct me actually what I should do. What should I do in this situation here? And this is kind of prelude to the Bhagavad Gita. So I thought I'd take today the first verse where Krishna starts speaking to Arjuna, where you might say this is where the Bhagavad Gita really begins, because Bhagavad Gita means actually the song of Bhagavan. Gita means song. Bhagavan and Bhagavat. Bhagavad Gita is the word Bhagavan and Bhagavad Gita comes from the word Bhagavan, who is actually also appears here in this first line, Sanskrit line of the text here we're going to read, where it says Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. And Bhagavan means it's a I mean, it means a very special person. It actually means the person who owns everything, who's in the possession of everything. That's what the word Bhagavan means. So here, Bhagavan, Krishna, he starts speaking to Arjuna. After Arjuna, he has revealed actually how he's feeling. He's confused, and basically he's inclined that he's to not fight at all in this horrible war that's going to take place. So here, the Sanskrit is Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Asochan Anvasochas Tvam Pragyavadam Chabasa Se Gatasun Agatasun Sjananu Sochanti Pandita. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. This is Krishna's first instruction. And you can even kind of visualize the drama here. Arjuna has just, very, very graphically described his whole situation, and it is, can anyone imagine a more perplexing situation and more dramatic situation that you have to enter a war with actually probably millions of soldiers on both sides, and you're fighting your own family. But here Arjuna and Krishna, in replying to say, Arjuna, you're lamenting for something that is so insignificant. Why do you lament for this? This is it's really, it's quite a dramatic reply, and Krishna's responses to Arjuna is very, very paradoxical. This is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita, of one of the beautiful things about Bhagavad Gita. I'll just take it again. While speaking learned words, you're mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. And Srila Prabhupada's purport reads, the Lord at once took the position of the teacher and chastised the student, calling him indirectly a fool. The Lord said, you're talking like a learned man, but you do not know that one who is learned, one who knows what is body and what is soul, does not lament for any states of the body, neither in the living nor in the dead condition. As explained in later chapters, it will be clear that knowledge means to know matter and spirit and the controller of both. Arjuna argued that religious principles should be given more importance than politics or sociology, but he did not know that knowledge of matter, soul and the supreme is even more important than religious formularies. And because he was lacking in that knowledge, he should not have posed himself as a very learned man. As he did not happen to be a very learned man, he was consequently lamenting for something which was unworthy of lamentation. The body is born and is destined to be vanquished today or tomorrow. Therefore, the body is not as important as the soul. One who knows this is actually learned, and for him there is no cause for lamentation, regardless of the condition of the material body. So this is the first theme here in the Bhagavad Gita. This is why it's so interesting. We see that Krishna immediately, he brings the discussion down to the essence, which is spiritual in nature. This is why this is a spiritual book. Krishna immediately brings a whole thing into a spiritual perspective. And the spiritual perspective is actually very simple and straightforward. Arjuna is here lamenting that, we all gonna die. And Krishna brings it down to, it's only the body that dies, Arjuna. Why are you lamenting for the body? Whether the body will die in a war, or you'll go to the forest and be great ascetic, and then you'll die there, or you'll die, in your comfortable home, surrounded by your relatives, or whatever, it doesn't matter, the body is going to die. Why are you lamenting for that? Learned persons do not lament for the body, whether the body is living or dead. There's no reason to lament for that. There was a time, Krishna, he speaks that in a few verses later, say there was a time when the body did not exist. Now the body is existing, and then there'll be a time when the body is not existing. Why are we lamenting? Just there's an intermediate stage. Basically, the body does not exist. There's a short intermediate period where the body exists, and then it doesn't exist anymore. Why are you so concerned about the body? It just comes and goes. It's like the clouds. There's a clear sky, and then a cloud appears and is there for a couple of hours, and then it disperses, and then it's clear sky again. Why lament? It's like lamenting for the cloud that comes and goes. The body is like that. And, of course, the next verse brings down to the real essence. It's not, because Krishna's talk is not a talk about the body, it's actually a talk about the soul. And Arjuna, his whole lamentation was based on the body and not on the soul. This is, very, very, it's very clear and simple, straightforward logic. I'll read the next verse. Na tveva ham dyatunasam na tvam neme dyanadipa na chaiva na bhavishyama sarve vayam atha param. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. One could even almost feel like a sensation going through the body when one hears Krishna speak, on the battlefield like that. First he says, now you're lamenting for something that is not worthy of lamentation. And then he looks up and then he says, there's never been a time when I did not exist, or when you or all these kings we're seeing here, they're surrounded by thousands of kings from all over the world. There's never been a time when we did not exist, nor shall any of us in the future ever cease to be. We are eternal beings. Krishna immediately brings it down to this. We are all eternal beings. We're dressed in some temporary dresses or clothes right now, but this is not our real identity. We're simply playing some roles. Here we are playing kings, we're playing soldiers, warriors, and we're about to enter a battle, but actually it's just, we're just dressed like that. It's just a drama. And why lament for what goes on in a drama? This is not our real identity. Actually, Arjuna, we do not die, we are eternal. Eternal means we have always existed, and we will always exist. Sometimes some have the idea that eternal means that we have a beginning in time. We came into being when we were born, and after that we will live eternally. But that's actually not what eternality means, according to the Bhagavad Gita. Eternality means we are simply beginningless. The person, the soul is beginningless, and also will never cease to exist. So this is where Krishna, he immediately picks up the discussion, and that is of course the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. This is what makes it such a unique philosophical discussion. He immediately gets into explaining why, Arjuna, it is that you are eternal. Because Bhagavad Gita is not a book of dogma, or just here's some dogma and Arjuna and Krishna asked Arjuna, you kindly just blindly believe what I tell you, and then you will then you'll get out of confusion. No, he speaks with logic and reason. That is essential in the Bhagavad Gita. So he goes on and explains, and this is, of course, all devotees know this verse, or everyone who studied the Bhagavad Gita a little knows this verse. It's one of the most often quoted verses in the Bhagavad Gita. But Krishna, he starts saying actually, just as a soul is wandering in this life, in this body, from childhood to youth to old age, similarly, the soul wanders into another body after death. And then it says, a self-realized soul is not bewildered by this change. Those who actually are self-realized, they are not bewildered at the time of death. Others are bewildered. Those who do not know what the self is, who they are, they're very confused when death comes. But those who are in knowledge of the self, no, they're not. They have no reason. They're dhira. The Sanskrit word is dhira. That means they are undisturbed. They are as undisturbed as when one goes from one room to another room, or when one takes off one's clothes and put on some other clothes. I mean, these are not generally causes for great consternation. I'm going from this room to that room, or I'm putting on taking off my coat and putting on a sweater. I mean, it's just something one doesn't even think of it. Someone who's actually self-realized, he has the same, relation to dying. It's just because he knows the self does not die. It's only the external body that is changing, and so why be disturbed about that? And self-realized, this last verse, where Krishna says that how the soul wanders from, in this body, childhood, youth, old age, actually contains a seeds of self-realization. Self-realization, of course, means understand yourself, and probably that is the most important item or issue or topic in knowledge of all and in all education, is to know yourself. I think that's a basis of all Vedic education. You have to know yourself, who you are. Without this knowledge, everything else has no value at all. It's like Srila Prabhupada gave the example. It's like you have so many zeros, but no matter how many zeros you have, you still only have zero, nothing. So we can have so much knowledge, so much education, but without knowing who we are, its value is zero. But if we have knowledge of who we are, of the self, then actually suddenly, it's like putting a 1 in front. And then suddenly the zeros have some meaning. You have many zeros and you have 1. You actually have a quite big number. Then knowledge, when it's combined with understanding of self, is very, very useful. But without that, it's empty. It's actually completely empty. So in this verse is the key to understanding something about the self. And the example is quite simple, or it's a very straightforward and simple observation that Krishna is pointing to here. He's explaining how the body is always changing. Childhood, youth, old age. But it's the same self that goes through all these stages in life. There's no change. I am the same me that I always have been from when I was 5 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, 40 years old. I do not change. I'm constantly the same. But the body is always changing. The body is always changing. So that must be two separate things we're talking about. The self cannot be the body because the body is always changing, and the self is constantly the same. So, and actually, if you see it, talking about reincarnation, which basically means that the same I, the same self, goes through or experiences or lives in different bodies at different points in time. Reincarnation is actually happening right in front of our eyes, because we had a body as a child, and now we have a body as a youth maybe, or as a middle-aged person, or as an old person. And actually these are different bodies, but I'm the same self, I'm the same me. So that means I've already experienced it within this lifetime, living in different bodies. I've actually already experienced reincarnation. And since I am unchanging, the same, going through different bodies, it goes to, it's obvious we must also continue to live when we die. The self has nothing to do with the body. This is Krishna's very simple and straightforward logic. And from there on, the whole Bhagavad Gita is actually, he expanded from this simple point. It's simple, but it's still the basis of everything. That's another thing also in Vedic knowledge, the way we construct, or the sages who've written the Vedas are constructing the Vedic knowledge. They take some basic points and then they simply expand them, but they never give up the basic points. It's always based on that. It always comes back to the same basics. In our education generally, we do not have experience of that. We, what we learned when we went to kindergarten or first or second grade, simple children stories or fables and like that. After that, we forget all about them. Or Santa Claus, they told us about Santa Claus, and at one point they told he doesn't exist. And then okay, so that was, we're not using that anymore. And often on education knowledge like that, we learn something, and then we learn something else and forget what we learned, and they're not really connected. But Vedic knowledge is different. There's some, something basic is given that even a child can understand. This about the self being different from the body, and the body is changing, a child can understand. And I mean, I know it's not just theory. I mean, we explain it to children all the time also, and they can immediately understand it. Actually, sometimes it's more difficult to teach, to explain this to an adult, to a grown-up person, because although it's actually simple and straightforward, and truth is one thing that characterizes truth is that it is simple and straightforward. But sometimes it becomes so complicated that we cannot even see the very obvious that I am unchanging, the same. My desires may change, and I may be filled with so many desires, and later on have different desires, or different moods, or different, or even, sometimes I may be, very pensive and contemplative, and sometimes I may get or very angry suddenly, or very happy, or very sad, and like that. So, but actually that's just, it's still me who just am, the mind is waving, but it's the same I behind who is there experiencing being angry or happy and so on. But sometimes we get so, entangled in our minds and that we can even have hard time simply contemplating ourselves. Meaning, just this is especially in modern stress society where we've been bombarded with information and news, and where there's so many, things we have to do and so on. It's sometimes very difficult for us simply to sit down, close our eyes, and just, be ourselves. No thoughts, just observe ourselves. Very difficult for modern man to do that. But actually, if we do it, and actually we'll observe, I'm the same I've always been within. I'm unchangingly the same. So this simple fact is what the whole of what Krishna's teachings in the Bhagavad Gita is based on. This is what here in the purport Prabhupada points out. This is what is really important. Matter, spirit, and the controller of both. Arjuna was arguing that here in this battle where we're standing, we cannot just base it on politics. Politics is a very mundane thing. It has to be based on religious principles. Our decisions should be based on religious principles, morals and ethics and dharma. The Vedic word is dharma. What is actually the true religious principle that we should follow. And but we see that actually that did not make Arjuna clear about what he should do. And actually it turns out it brought him to the wrong conclusion. It turns out actually Arjuna, although it appears very laudable that he will not fight and he will not be violent, it turns out he's wrong. He's actually choosing the wrong path. The right path for Arjuna right now is to be violent and go and kill. And that's also that's also what is paradox about Bhagavad Gita. A book with paradoxes is actually a beautiful book. Books that have paradoxes, because it brings us out of this where we just automatically think, or we just take things for granted. When we're confronted with a paradox, we suddenly have to start thinking, and we have to start, actually take up, revising whatever we just take for granted for being true. We actually have to question, but this is actually true, and this forces us to go deeper in our understanding. So Bhagavad Gita is actually, Krishna is speaking like that. Vyasadeva, who wrote Bhagavad Gita, wrote it down. He is constructed in such a way that with these paradoxes, it forces us to go deeper and not just like automatically think, this is right and this is wrong. And because we do that, we think that yes, being non-violent, that's of course right, and violent is wrong, but maybe it's not. And this situation actually turns out, well, actually violence for the right cause actually is the right thing. So, but Arjuna, so Prabhupada says here that although Arjuna says religious principles should be way higher, or should be given more weight than simply politics, Prabhupada points out actually Krishna is saying there's an even higher thing, and this is knowledge of matter and spirit and the controller of both. This is actually this is real spiritual, or we use the word transcendental knowledge. This is a transcendental platform on which Bhagavad Gita is working. It's a book that gives knowledge not only about the difference between matter and spirit, as we see here, body and soul, or body and self. This is matter and spirit, but also the controller of both. The controller of both, because it's not that spirit and matter are not independent. Both are controlled entities. Matter, of course, is inanimate, and that is being controlled. But also, the spirit is being controlled. There's someone who's controlling each and every one of us. This is one of the things that also will be revealed in the Bhagavad Gita. We generally think that we are free and independent. But of course, Arjuna's example shows that we are not, because he's in a situation where he cannot see anything good coming out of whatever he does. So who wants that if we actually are free? Who likes to be, who would freely choose a situation where no matter what he chooses, the outcome is evil? That shows Arjuna is not really the controller of the situation and of his own destiny even. He is in one sense, but he's not, higher circumstances are controlling him. Higher, he's under a control, he's in a controlled situation. So the relationship between the dependent soul and the controller, the supreme controller, is there in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita is a discussion of the matter, spirit, and the controller, and how this, and all the relationship between these three entities. Spirit, as is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, is not just one. There's two kinds of spirit actually. There's individual spirit souls, inhabiting each individual body, not only human, but all bodies, humans, animals, plant bodies, higher beings, and so on. All there are individual beings, but then there is the supreme being who's controlling all of them, and this supreme being is presented in the Bhagavad Gita. Actually, Bhagavad Gita is actually the supreme being talking himself. This is also one thing that is important to understand the mystery of the Bhagavad Gita, that Krishna, who is speaking the Bhagavad Gita, at least according to Bhagavad Gita itself, is the supreme being who is actually the supreme controller, the supreme, as Prabhupada translates, the supreme personality of Godhead. There is a English word Godhead broadly denotes, I think you can say God also, but the whole God and the complete divine arrangements, over all of existence. That's kind of what you see by Godhead. And according to the Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic literatures in general, Krishna, he is actually the supreme personality of Godhead, which means we have a discussion, as Søren is a little involved with that. Oh yes, let's asking for his opinion on that. About the term supreme personality of Godhead. It's of course an English term, a translation of Bhagavan, and it's not a, you might say, literal translation. It's a translation of Srila Prabhupada's spiritual masters. His translation. He's the one who gave the term supreme personality of Godhead. It has many, many deep meanings, but it's one meaning. One clear meaning is that the Godhead, God has different personalities, just like we have also different personalities. We are one kind of personality, like here, and when we're in a different circumstance, we'll manifest a different personality. Same person showing different personalities. And according to the Vedas, God is also like that. He has his personalities according to circumstance. Sometimes he's, we see him as a big controller, the Lord. But also, there's in other situations, it's not so much the Lord. He's actually the friend, or the real lover of the living being, or he has different, he has different relationships, different personalities. And according to Bhagavad Gita and the Vedic literatures, Krishna is actually the supreme personality that God he manifests as Krishna. And this Bhagavad Gita thus is the discussion between this supreme personality of Godhead and his instruction to a soul like us, and what to do in a situation when we are confused. And this is basically, it's very often the situation for all of us, because we live in a confusing world. So we are basically always in a confused situation, and we always have a battle in front of us. Kurukshetra is often taken also like symbolically, although it was an actual battle that took place like 5,000 years ago. It also has its symbolic representation that actually it's the same. We are all in the, in dilemmas and perplexities. What to do? I can see whatever I do, nothing seems right. What to do? Well, Bhagavad Gita is about that. Bhagavad Gita is about that. How to actually, instead of just leading oneself, letting one's own, imperfect intelligence or discrimination guide oneself. It's actually how to let the Supreme Lord, to let God lead one. The signs of just putting, like here Arjuna, he has taken the reins to his horses and given them to Krishna. He says, now you drive my horses. So Bhagavad Gita is actually, in one sense, a book how one can give the reins to Krishna and let him drive our horses, which will obviously lead us to the highest destination, because we do not know. The Supreme Lord knows, what is the best destination for all of us. And here in this Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna, you should still fight, but not for yourself, you should fight for me, because this is my desire that this battle should take place. And Bhagavad Gita is a science of how one instead of acting for one's, for one's own satisfaction, simply learns to act as Krishna wants for the satisfaction of Krishna. And this is the real secret of life that is given in the Bhagavad Gita. I think I should stop here. Do you have any questions? We have 2 minutes for questions, I think. No questions? Marji?
Everybody from different religions, they say this is God, this is God, this is God. And some people don't even believe in God.
Mm.
And how do we explain us that Krishna is really the Supreme? How do you take us into that belief? What may be
How did believe? I don't know if we can say believe as is the right word. One thing you have to establish is whether God exists or does not exist. That's a separate question, and that can be addressed. Krishna addresses that in Bhagavad Gita and gives you reasons why God must exist, and we can have a whole lecture on that. Why God must exist. It's in one sense it's simple when you understand the first basics, that the self is unchanging and is not the body, because that means there's universe consists not only of matter but of spirit and matter. Modern materialistic science is overlooking either deliberately or just ignorantly that actually there's two substances in the universe. They would, modern, you might say, reductionistic science wants to reduce everything to matter, atom, molecules, energy, forces, and so on. And modern science, modern biology, and so on is based on that assumption. So then it's of course difficult to establish the existence of God, because what is God if matter is all there is? But once you actually realize or discover that actually, modern science, they're basically wrong. Actually they overlook this simple point: the self is not matter. And you discover the self is a separate thing. Actually, consciousness, because the self means consciousness. Consciousness has nothing to do with matter. It's a different substance that is actually existing, irreducibly existing. Then it becomes easy to understand that God must exist, because God is simply the big consciousness. We are tiny, we just small sparks of consciousness, but there must be a source of that consciousness. Or like if you have a sun ray, now you might say we have a sun ray in the room here, and but immediately when we see the sun ray, we understand, there must be a source of that sun ray. The sun ray is part of the great sun. So consciousness, each conscious self must be part of a big consciousness, or the source of everything that everything comes from must also be conscious. That's also one way to put it. We are conscious. We have a source. We're not the source of everything. We are emanations from something. So that must also be conscious. So then we can conclude that source is also conscious, or God, or person. Conscious means person. So that's easy to establish that, if you understand this point, from that the self exists, God must exist from there. It follows actually very few logical steps. It follows very fast. God must exist from this. That Krishna is God, yeah. I mean, we can have. Prabhupada used to say, he would say, this is our candidate for God. Krishna is our candidate. And then we can look at other candidates, and we can evaluate them. Maybe it's the same name for, different names for the same person we're talking about. It's possible. But Krishna is very concrete. Does anyone have else such a clear description of the actual person who's supposed to be God? No, I mean, and so far, to my knowledge, no one has come up with a different candidate than Krishna. Jesus not. He said, "I'm the Son of God." That's what the Bible says. And he definitely is, and we have all respect for Jesus Christ, but he does not claim he's God. And to my knowledge, there's no other candidate. Really, is there any other book where the person says, "I'm God"? Written by a sane person. As that Bhagavad Gita is a sane book. It's not an insane book that you can find all kinds of, madmen writing all kinds of. But here we're talking about it's a philosophical book that has been lasting for 5,000 years. So we're talking about sanity, and in this sane book, the person claims he's God, and as long as I say, if there's no other candidate, then Krishna wins by default, I'd say. And if there's other candidate, then we can start looking at it. Prabhupada would argue like that. Krishna has been accepted by thousands of years by the greatest teachers and sages and so on as the Supreme Lord. I think we have to stop now, isn't it? Yeah. We are going to have upstairs afterwards in the other building.